And it would be nice. It would be comforting. And I've got some colleagues who would say, no, no, I'd rather not have that. And I would say to you, but why? When we were growing up as boys, have I ever cheated you? Have I ever bested you only because I cheated you? Have you ever known me to be a child molester? Or we bring people in here about whom we know absolutely nothing. Nothing. There is no process of validation. I mean, you say, well, you know, I see a paper here which says that he was called to the bar and so and so. That cannot be all. You watch Miss Sotomayor. You watch the hell she's going to have to go through.
Get on the bed.
Here is a woman who comes to you, what is it, top of her class at Princeton. Top of her class at Yale. And they're not going to just open the door and lay down a red carpet for them. I think we need a process, not necessarily that extreme, but I think we need a process by which we know who it is that we are appointing. Now we've got another problem that has begun to fester. For the first time in the history of this country, we now have retired foreign judges after they will have left office, now coming back to the bar, even though before they were judges they had no right to practice in this country. Because why? Under our governing legislation, only citizens were qualified to practice. And so you have this new breed who are brash enough, and there are no Bahamians in the midst. No Bahamian is indecent enough to believe that if they have now demitted office to suddenly go looking for work to compete against younger lawyers. But it's happened now. And so it's going to be embarrassing for some of us who have to take the position the very first time it happens. And I've taken it even with Bahamian judges. We have one or two who I think got a little carried away and did, after they admitted office, try to come back to the bar, only because they had a right to practice. And I had to remind them, you have no business here opposite me. Not that I fear you intellectually, but it's indecent. And if your name appears on the very instrument of appointment of that judge up there, when you were in another capacity, do you think it's right to put that judge in that? But he can do so, because the judge who's up there carries a different passport. He can intimidate them.
Foreign judges is not the core issue.
No.
Get to the core issue.
No.
My father-in-law was a foreign judge.
Who was your father-in-law?
And so,
Oh, fine man. No, but ask him for all of his decency, and I mean, I say a fine man, great Anglican. Ask him how he was treated. Ask him. There was another one from Guyana, Adams, B.O. Adams, fine man. Don't want them. They're too much of lawyers. They're too fine of people. They don't want that type. Would you agree with me? He might not have complained even to you or in your presence. I remember him. They took his job and they gave it to somebody else. He started out, he was then a magistrate, and he came and he acted for a while. And I have the same pleasure of appearing before him as I did Mr. Adams. But Adams couldn't go anywhere, nor could Van Solomon. Now, I agree with you. I mean, I'm being very general when I paint it that way. And that's because I don't want to say that the foreign judges who come here are more than just foreign judges. I don't want to get into that. Because I think that the blame is still ultimately ours, if we do not subject them.
Right.
Van Solomon came as a former ombudsman. He was a former chancellor of the Anglican diocese, if I'm correct, if I'm not correct. He came with his credentials. He's a decent man.
Mr. Glinton, in my country there is a similar process of degradation of the quality of the judiciary as a third power. And the reason seems to be, it's not only one, but the lack of financing, independence in the financing of the judiciary system. It's always begging the other for a budget, and therefore it cannot say no to that. And the other question is whether the lack of publicity, let's say the public or a camera instead of the usual public in the court, may be a factor.
Well, it might do. And let me get back to this independent financing, because I think it is very important. The argument is usually made that the reason why we don't have more natives as judges is that we don't pay them enough. That's not so. We don't respect judges in this country. If you go to an official function, whether it's on Clifford Park or in the cathedral, and you look at the seating arrangements, and you will never see this in England or any other country. Judges, I mean, you would find Her Majesty sitting up there, but next to that you would find the Lord Chancellor, and you will find all of those judges in the household next to her. Here, if the Chief Justice finds himself maybe 3 rows behind maybe the Commissioner of Police and some others, he's lucky, and he won't complain. And nobody, it never occurs to anyone that it is of the 3 branches the only one which is supreme. You don't hear about a supreme executive or supreme legislature, supreme judicature, Supreme Court. And there's a reason for that. Its supremacy is entrenched. Well, again, what difference does it make if you have this great big share and you continue to put someone that is not of the size to fit it? And they have a little knife and they continue to just whittle it down until it meets their size. And when the great man does come along, the chair is too small. It can't hold her. Or the great woman can't hold her. We have sat back and watched it decrease in size and importance. So that when it decreases in importance, who wants it? It is decreased in value. What then is the incentive for the young, brilliant child who goes to Oxford or Cambridge or wherever and comes back? And I'll tell you, we've got some very bright young kids. I mean, nowadays, you've got kids, you know, going and doing their graduate work and all that stuff. I mean, in my day, I mean, that was kind of rare. But now you see them. They've become a new class. But not much more than that. In England, when you see a judge of the High Court in England, and I speak from England because this is my experience, and I know the same is true of Australia. In any of these countries, you can bet your bottom dollar, to use an old cliche, that you see someone who was at the top of his or her practice. So that when you only find 12 persons in the House and Judicial Committee of the House of Lords, you won't find 12 or 13 or 14 others saying, well, you know, he got my position. Everybody else will tell you, those are the 12, in fact, who are deserving of it. And they're not all Englishmen. The English have been rather smart. English understand precisely because during my time in practice, particularly when I go to Privy Council, the Scots have always been essentially the big boys, usually the what we call the law lord or the woolsack, Scots law lords. Been very able, and I think that's a political machination because other judges vote on who is to be the senior law lord. But they know how it is and how important it is. I mean, when we prided ourselves, for example, of remaining or continuing our contact with the Privy Council, it was for a purpose. To take the benefit of that. But